Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Your Life is Yours. My name is Friederike Peters, and I have a very special interview guest today, Ram Alsaman. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Welcome.
That's perfect. Well, hey.
Ram is joining us from Tenerife. I could mention because you might recognize that beautiful postcard setting from the interview that I did with Mia, which is because
That's
Ram is
really
Mia's
kind.
partner and they're both together there. So I invited Ram because I find his journey in life super fascinating. I met him about 2 years ago when he was doing and organizing, hosting the first completion process gathering in Berlin. And since then, we've done some more workshops together. And he also is very, very
Yeah.
dedicated to shadow work and creating communities, permaculture. You're right now learning to grow your own food, as I understand. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, but it hasn't always been that way that
Yeah.
Ram is doing all these
Been a
things.
journey.
Can you tell us a little bit about something that I forgot to mention just now, and maybe some of the just the stations of where you were in life when, just roughly?
Mhm. Wow, where to start? So, yeah, first I want to thank you for inviting me to be in your
Yeah.
program, and I'm happy to be here. So, yeah, obviously was not my life even like few years ago. I had like so many life change in my life and turning points, and it feels like it's the better it get, the better it get. And right now we are in a community with our friends, and we're trying to put like our values in practice as much as the um, circumstances allow. So we are right now in a farm where we grow organically our food, and also practice a lot of uh, communication and like spiritual growth with our friends in this community. But that was like a completely unrealistic dream if I look at my life even like 4 years ago.
Mm,
So yeah, my life has been changing a lot in the last maybe even like 10 years. I don't know.
yeah. So you were born in Syria, correct?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I born in a persecuted minority. If some of you know Druze or Druzen, it's a
Mm,
minority group who's like based on religion called Tawhid, and it's based on a spiritual culture. So there's like um, kind of like a different beliefs than what people know about Syria or Middle East, and that
mm,
kind of what planted in me the desire to know more. Because when I grew up, like the religion was very mysterious, so my parents would be like, when I ask what's God or like what's the purpose of life, it's like find it out yourself. And
okay.
I think that was what's special about upbringing, like as a family, because like many Druze people, they grow up with this lifestyle where they are requested to find the truth, and that I feel like impacted my life so much. Uh, yeah,
I
and make
didn't
me
know
who I
that.
am right now.
Yeah. Yeah, because it, also it's unusual to get this kind of answer, right? I don't know how old you were when you asked these
Mhm.
questions, but often when, kids ask parents these kind of things, they get like this answer, this is what it is. So take it.
Yeah, and that like resulted in many like unanswered question because nobody could give me an answer. So I turned to religion book. I didn't find like anything. I read the Bible and the Quran and like
Mhm,
our wisdom books, which is like 16 wisdom books, which are like summary of many religions. I
mhm,
read some of them, but I couldn't understand because it was like complicated language.
mhm.
And later in life, I had near-death experience, and that kind of like gave me answers more than anything I read before,
I
because
didn't
it
know
showed me,
this either.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. So that was kind of like the beginning of me feeling that there is something more than the material life. I
Mm,
saw, I like get like very real experience of there is something more than my body, my memories, and my thoughts.
Mm.
And that kind of was the introduction of why I started following spiritual group in my hometown called Ananda Marga,
Mhm.
which is Indian-based spiritual group with like kind of like setting like we have like a guru and like practice like morning meditation, chanting, fasting, like many different aspects that kind of like give me the tools where I can like face challenges in life and like process um, yeah, like
Wow.
childhood trauma and things in there.
Mhm. Just so people kind of know, just like the stations where you were. So from Syria, in Syria, you also founded
Mhm.
the first animal rights movement, right, in the Arab
Yeah,
region.
yeah. So just like a quick timeline, I
Mm-hmm.
started in like the minority group in Syria, and then I moved to big city where like a lot of culture, and then I moved to Switzerland. I was lucky to get a work contract with the United Nations, and then I moved to Denmark. I tried living there for like a few weeks, and then because of visa issue, I found it the easiest thing to go to Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and I stayed it there until like last year.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, I traveled a lot in Europe and other countries, but that's like the quick timeline.
Yeah.
The creating the vegan movement was, I think, when I was in high school. That was like my
Wow.
passion at that time.
And what sparked all these changes, all these steps, all these transitions from this place to that place, and or what sparked, founding the animal rights movement and all these things? Like, what was the initiator of all of that?
It's still hard for me to put my point in one specific one, but always inside me, I had the desire for welfare and freedom
Mm.
and fairness. So that was like when I discovered that actually we don't need to eat animals to be healthy. Like I was eating them because I was convinced by my parents, like anyone who might be watching this in society at large, they were like, you have to eat animals to be healthy. And that was like my big belief. And when I discovered it actually not true, and there is even like 500,000,000 people in India, Hindus living in a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle, I was like, wow, that's so much like misleading information. And I was like feeling how much the animal are suffering. Like at that time, I didn't know any vegetarian in my hometown. Later on, I discovered that there's one person. So I contacted him, and he's like this masculine guy. I was like, Mom, you lied to me. Because, at that age, I think I was like 17. I was like believing because she also like very informed about medical things. She's psychologist and like my aunt is a doctor. So I was like very like sure that they know better than me. And then I was
Mhm.
like, no. So that was the first step. And then knowing like how much things can wrong with the world, like to have this societally believe that eating animal is normal made me question many things like
Mhm.
religion, like finance, like all this thing. And I was like feeling a lot of anger about not being able to change it. And from that space, I was like, what I can do as like individual person. So I started talking about it in events. And later I thought like maybe because I can speak Arabic and there is like many people who are willing to receive this message, I started a Facebook page. And right now there is, I think, more than 500,000 reach a week. So
Mm.
which is like really big. We have about 100,000 followers in the Facebook page. And it was the initiating for the kind of like the vegan movement in the Arabic language for
Mm. Something you just said earlier really touched me. You said that because you realized, well, they lied to me, or maybe they just didn't know better, but the information was misleading, made me
yes,
question everything else.
yeah,
Was this
exactly.
was this just a feeling inside of you, or what kind of conclusions did you draw from that for yourself, not just about, the animal rights movement, but just in general?
I think it created a crisis in my life
Hmm.
like it was not easy at all to know that there is many things were going wrong and like in my external life. So it was like really tough pillow to swallow.
Mm.
And what created a lot of distrust. And I'm still like learning to trust my intuition more and more. And now I have like I'm in a place where I trust my intuition more than information I receive from the outside.
Mm.
And that helping me a lot to decide like where I want to be right now in life.
That is so important. That just touches me so much because I don't know whenever you guys are watching this, but it's probably gonna still be coronavirus time in the world whenever you watch this.
Yeah.
So I think this is so important. You know, there's one thing is the information stream, and we all have access to so
Hmm.
much information, but then it's like, what's your inner wisdom actually saying? You
Yeah,
know, and
exactly.
does your inner wisdom need all this information to make a decision? You know, like I'm trying to say, actually, I don't think so. Like it's good to have that
Yeah.
information and to have access to information, but then it's
Hmm.
like that's here, you know,
Yeah,
but the
exactly.
inner wisdom is more like, for me, it's like more the heart space or some inner knowing, I don't know, but
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And like looking at our life, like how many things we discovered that it was giving to us in a wrong kind of like perspective, or like to serve a motive, or to serve like somebody's interest or somebody's financial benefit.
mm,
Knowing how much wrong information we get from media, from other things, like we can't really trust. Like we really need to go back to our center and feel what feels like right and what feels wrong. They might have so many evidence that convince your mind, but
mm-hmm,
what's your heart or your intuition is telling you? So I think that's the most important things to empower in ourselves at this time.
mm-hmm. Would you say that also the anger that you felt about all of this was a driving force in, you know, the steps that you then took? Because you could have had the opposite
Yeah,
reaction, you know, you could have been like, ah, this world is shitty and I'm
powerless.
hiding, you know?
Yeah, totally. Totally. I think anger, like there's so many people like suppress anger or like find it like unproductive. For me, anger is still the driving force before like and behind any big decision I make in life.
Mm,
And I feel the way you act on your anger is completely different from
mm,
like being like, oh, it's so evil. They are like, you see all those people who believe in conspiracy, they just like not doing any empowered decision, but like actually what you can do now is you're in your hand. And I
mm-hmm,
felt like I did this in my life in many situations. Like I
mm-hmm,
felt, for example, in the Arab Spring, when like there was a chance to talk about freedom. Of course, it turned like in a very messy way, but at the beginning we had like 1 year of like opportunity for people to see that actually we are not having our human right here and we can ask for it. So that was like a beautiful time where people can decide. Unfortunately, because of religion and like other country manipulation, things went like in a kind of like a wrong direction.
mm-hmm,
And this is what we are facing right now. Like, are we facing a time where people can really tune to themselves and see what decision they can make for themselves, how they can affect their government, or situation will go worse.
mm. I was just thinking that it's interesting that you say there's still this anger behind most decisions that you make, which could also sound really strange, right? Like, oh, okay, he's an angry dude.
Yeah,
You know?
maybe I need to clarify
Yeah.
like the way I see anger is energy. Like it's depend like where you channel this energy. Like would you channel it with screaming on something, or would you channel it in like putting it in a like kind of like moving it towards creation?
Mm.
Yeah, but I see your point that it might not make sense for many people.
I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that it's an interesting perspective,
Hmm.
because what I was thinking is that, yeah, because anger is kind of forward moving. Like when there's anger energy, it's like it wants to come out. And when
Yeah.
you hold it in, it's not gonna resolve. It just won't. It's always going to be this like uncomfortable feeling inside.
Yeah.
So I think like the way that I understand you is that you take or you recognize something is bothering me, right? And why? And that's making me angry and this
Hmm.
and this and this. And then it turns into like a productive energy where it goes, okay, now we can do something about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's nothing bad, you know, that's a very good way of dealing with it, because otherwise you would just go into maybe a state of powerlessness or victimhood that doesn't move
Yeah,
forward.
totally. And like also I see that might some people might think like doing action based on anger can be harmful. And that's true if it's like the action itself is driven by anger, but that's not what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is like letting this energy move you to a
Mm-hmm.
different place. Like for example, I get angry about the anger about the system, how it's like basically messed up. So
Mm-hmm.
what I would do instead of like going and like hating the president or like blaming the government or doing something, I created something that helped changing the system from inside. Like for example, the animal rights organization.
Yeah.
And from that space was like actually pushed in anger. Like I see something going wrong in the world. And that doesn't mean when I talk with somebody about this, I put my anger on him or her.
Mm-hmm.
The anger is like the motive for creating a difference, like making difference.
Yeah.
And the way you put it out in the world, it's up to you and to your awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is so important to point out that you don't go like screaming, you know, this is bad. And sometimes that's necessary. And sometimes people need to do that. But
Yeah,
if you stay in that energy that is like, I'm against you, then it's not helpful because you can just keep
totally.
focusing on
It's
what you
just
don't want.
yeah, just creating separation also. That's like the opposite of like what I see our, like also you, I appreciate this about your work so much, that we are creating integration in this world. Like we are want
Mhm.
to bring people closer. And this is what we do in the animal rights movement also. The way I see it, I know many other activists do it in a different way, but the way I see it, we're bringing connection between people who eat animals and the animal themselves to create
Mm.
a harmonious way that we don't need to harm each other or like
Yeah.
harm them because they are not harming us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions in my mind. Like you put this little thing in my head now with the near death experience. Was that still when you were still in Syria or did that happen somewhere else?
Yeah, that was when I was 17. I think we were going
Hmm.
on a like a trip to the beach and we had a bus accident. It was not bad, like we didn't get damaged, but just like the kind of like the bus was going like like
Mm-hmm.
crazy, and I felt like that's the end of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't know what happened at that time until I read the book about it 1 year later. But basically, what I saw like myself going out of my body and like seeing everybody screaming in the bus. And for sudden, I saw, I think before that, I saw like kind of a memory of all my life, like all my life memories just like going through me.
Mm.
And that was like, wow. And then I kind of like for a little moment, I was out of my body. And that moment, I was like, wow, I'm not my body.
Mm.
So that was like kind of like first time I sensed something more than physical.
Yeah. Have you had other experiences since then where you went out of your body?
Yeah, actually I did, but it came with meditation. I was very disciplined, like at the beginning of my spiritual journey. I was doing meditation 2 times a day and
Mm.
chanting and yoga. And I did experience some on meditation, like feeling more like expansion in my body. I felt like also like seeing some colors. I didn't understand what that at that time, like until
Mm.
like talking with my like the yoga teacher at that time. So like, wow, this is like real.
And that's beautiful also because I feel like, and I'm including myself, right? When I meditate, sometimes I'm like hoping for this like special experience. And sometimes I just
Mhm.
don't care. And then mostly the cool experiences come when you don't care or you don't know. Um,
Yeah. Well, actually, it happened sometimes at the beginning of my journey. Like when I started to have this in the meditation, I said like, this is the best. And I was like very convinced that actually like this kind of meditation is the best. And I was like also involved in like teaching people this kind of like specific meditation
mm,
in a very like convinced that actually this is the best. But then kind of like life started to show me that I can have this experience in the street without even meditating.
yeah.
That was the time where I get to know Eckhart Tolle actually, and he was like
Ah,
talking about being in the now and like allowing yourself to be present. And
yeah.
like the more you're present, you are the more in touch with kind of like higher, kind of like vibration or higher dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did Ram in Syria, who founded the animal rights movement, go to Ram in Tenerife? What were the
Oh my God. How much time we have for this question?
all the time we need? What do you think?
Okay.
Like, what do you think is necessary for people to know to understand how you got from that place to where you are now?
Hmm. I might go with something emotional during this.
Mm-hmm.
So bear with me. So at that time, like since my childhood, I felt my seek for freedom want me to go, like my desire for freedom want me to travel the world.
Mm.
In 2011, the revolution in Egypt and Tunis started, and we thought like, yeah, that's a great opportunity to get rid of like the Victorian regime. And at that time, I was super involved in like spreading awareness about what's human rights, because at that part of the world is not known so much. And having this dictatorial regime, this is the most risky thing you can do ever. Like you're risking your life, you're risking your family income, you're risking your own income, everything you put on risk. And I was like, it's worth it.
Mm.
So I kind of was very active at that time, as much as it feels safe to me. I also like did many crazy things. I was near to die 2 times during the activism.
Wow.
Long story short, I was later at that time I was working as a teacher and having like a very successful life, like teaching students, having like a big income comparing to that country. And I felt that it's my responsibility to stay there and to teach and to help like in a human rights perspective, like spreading this awareness. However, it was becoming more and more impossible for me to stay there because I had like two options. Other one to be like, if I continue, I would be arrested. Like they start to know what exactly I'm doing there, and there was like very high risk. So I had to leave, or I had to go to army, and there was like a lot of pressure on me. So at that time, I was also still involved in animal rights. Like in Syria, maybe the focus more was on human rights, but in the international organization, because we were like getting online and we had like many views from different countries who were like more peaceful. So I was still active in animal rights at that
Mm-hmm.
time. I was talking with a friend who's working in Switzerland, and she was like very in touch with me, like knowing what's going on with the animal rights, and she was also activist. And I was sharing with her that like now it's like almost like I'm almost like getting like really in trouble, and she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, would you like to come to Switzerland and like work here?" And I was like, well, yes. I don't know if I mentioned I have also a bachelor in IT, and
Mm-hmm.
I did my like several projects on helping like non-profit organization and like creating kind of like a system like IT system. So I was like, I applied for this position in the international telecommunication system in Switzerland, and I
Mm-hmm.
get accepted. So I was like, what? That was easier than I expected.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I feel like that was like as a result of doing shadow work. Like I didn't know at that time that it's a shadow work, but actually I was with the meditation I learned, I was more like sitting with the resistance and like resolving what was holding me back, which was like a relationship, it was like safety, it was safety in connection to people I know, fear of going to a place that I know nobody. Like I went to Geneva, I know only this person through internet. I don't know anybody else.
Wow, yeah.
So that was like a big jump in my life to move
Yeah.
from like kind of like one of the poorest place on earth to one of like the most like fancy and
Yeah,
expensive
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
place. And like within a month I earned money more than I did in a year in Syria. So it was like the contrast was like
Wow.
really massive. And I managed to save money for like the coming few months. And Switzerland known to be like very difficult with visa, so they were like giving me maybe 2 months and then 3 months and then 4 months.
So
So
you
I
had to
thought like
renew it
maybe,
every time.
yeah, exactly. It was a
Wow.
lot of paperwork. And I thought
Mm.
Germany at that time, they were open for students. So I applied for a student visa and I get accepted. So I moved to Germany, start to try learning German. I think for those of you who did try this, they know how struggle it is. And at that time was very difficult for me because all the trauma that was suppressed during the war, like it was so much stress, like stored in my body, was so overwhelming. Like the soon you feel like, for those of you who know like how to deal with trauma, the soon you are out of the kind of like the war zone or the danger zone, your system start to process all this stored pain and stored emotions. And that was when depression hit me really, really hard. And like just to mention like one example of how much pain and separation I lived at that time, as we are a minority group, we had like we were in the side of the regime when the revolution turned into civil war. And near to us, only 50 kilometers away, there was like Islamic city. So they were like more in the Islamic army. And the regime was used to like send the troops, soldiers from our minority to fight there.
Wow.
And at one of the morning, I heard that that's like really touching. I
I like
heard
almost cried. So like I'm there with you.
it's so that was like the first time I cried there in public. Like I was in the bus and I heard that the father of my friend has died there. And I was like so deeply touched. And knowing that he was killing people there because he was a soldier. And I know like I felt the pain of every like single person who suffered and died. I felt like I was like I couldn't hold it anymore. I was like crying in the bus publicly. Like it's like also very shameful there, like for a strong like Druze person to cry in public. It's like, and I couldn't hold my tears. It was so hurting
Yeah.
to see this connection. And like this is one example, and there is like many things as a like sensitive person, and it's very hard to live in this situation. So all this like suppression and disconnection hit me so much when I started
Yeah.
living in Switzerland and
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah.
And that was where the time I started doing the completion process. And that was like a big shift in my life where I saw that actually I can heal all this trauma. I feel like it's like endless amount of pain that I can't go out of it.
Yeah.
And also I start to remember that this separation and trauma is not from the war. It's basically from our childhood. So I start to learn that it's actually from the birth trauma. I went like in some deep healing journey to remember like from the separation of the war, I went to the childhood memory where I was like actually feeling the same pain when they took me away from my mother in the birth time.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what you just said is also important for people to understand because sometimes I get clients who are like, I don't know why this is coming up because I've been fine all this time. And now all of a sudden I feel so terrible. And it's like, yeah, because I believe that the pain comes out either, you know, in this horrible situation when it's so bad that you just can't hold it anymore, or you hold it in the whole time. But then when you get to a place of safety where all this pain feels safe, to come out.
Yeah.
It's like, because also your system is like, oh my God, finally I can like release all this
You can release,
protection,
yeah.
you know, and then it hits you. And then you're like, what's wrong with me? Because everything's good. Yeah, but maybe it wasn't good
Yeah.
before, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah. So maybe this is a little provocative question, not for you per se, but in
Mhm.
general. But do you think, because
Yeah.
what I hear you say is like you went through all these, you know, extreme experiences that also they were either kind of move or die, let's say, you know, like very simplified.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so somehow you always, in a way, you had to, in order to live also by your values and to stay safe, you had to move and you had to take some action steps,
Yeah.
or, you know, completely pull in. Do
Mhm.
you think, or how do you perceive society here or in Germany where you've lived for a while?
Mhm.
Do you feel like there's not enough suffering? There's not enough suffering in the sense that people don't feel like, what is lacking?
Mm. Yeah, I get you. I
Um,
get goosebumps when you were talking. Yeah, I feel that. Like living in a different society, like also I lived in Turkey, Syria, Lebanon,
mm,
Denmark, now Spain. Like each society have a different way of suffering. The way
mm,
of suffering that like our like friends in Germany experience is completely way like from different perspective. Like if you ask somebody who's living in Turkey or in Syria about Germany, they would say like they are the happiest country. When I lived there, it's not true. I didn't feel like I didn't see the happiest people there.
mm,
I sense that there is a lot of um, distance and isolation in people that it make it very difficult for them to be vulnerable and to open up for like their friends. Like the only way I sense vulnerability and openness is usually when people drink.
mm.
Like it's
Really,
very
that's
rare.
interesting. Mm,
Yeah, I it could be like also only my experience, but I found it very difficult for people to be like that close to each other without like drinking. I also had to drink to be part. Like I
mm,
really at that time I was so isolated, so I feel like if it's the only way that I'm gonna do it, like the pain of loneliness
mm-hmm,
was so big. But I sense in Germany that like the degree of discomfort or the degree of suffering, it kind of like everybody's experience it in a different level, so it's not discomfortable for them to think like, okay, I need to change something. It's very subtle somehow.
mm. I think it comes down to also something that I know, like one of our mentors, Teal Swan, just recently said, it's this quality of life thing, because in a way, what you were facing is like really also a threat to your life. Here, we're
Hmm.
not threatened to our life. Or, you know, we have a quality of life that maybe we're not completely happy with, but it's not, at least not in a simple sense, killing us.
Yeah, I sense that.
Yeah. So with your observation of the German culture, you said there is no room for vulnerability. And I feel
Very little
like,
room.
yeah, and I feel like that's not only um, detrimental to, you know, interpersonal relationships, but also with myself, because if I cannot be vulnerable with myself, then I also can't admit to myself where I'm not doing well or where
Yeah,
I might want to change something.
Hmm.
So part of what you do now is you bring people into exactly that space, or you create a safe space for people where they can be vulnerable. Tell me a little bit about, share a little bit of that passion that you have for this work with me, and
Yeah.
what do you see happens?
Yeah, so like as I shared before, like coming from depression and start doing the completion process was like, wow, like that's like there is a way out of this. So
Mm.
knowing Till Swan's teaching, I'm like, wow, that actually can like change my life. Let's try it with other people. So I would start doing connection games in Berlin, and that was like my way of creating intimacy and creating connection basically, because I was so lonely and I didn't find, like, I went to clubs, I went to party, I went to events, I didn't leave anything out of, I went even to spiritual gatherings, but I couldn't find this level of connection that I miss from my old friends in Syria. So I was left with nothing but
Mm.
to create something new. And
Yeah.
that was like the beginning when I started connection games. And when I had like more experience with the completion process and know from myself, like when I did it with myself or with a friend, when I helped a friend with it, I was like, that actually changed life,
Mm-hmm.
changed people's life. So I started doing the completion process gatherings and also like events that based on Thiel's teaching. And I like saw how much people get like connection, like many, I saw many people getting into relationship, many people like building deep friendship based on those
Mm.
gatherings.
Mm.
And now Berlin is known to be like one of the kind of like Thiel tribe or hubs for connection and community,
Yeah.
and we have
Yeah.
many people going there.
What is one or two of those connection games that you do? Share with us what happens during these games,
Mhm.
events.
So one of them is just like, for example, channeling your deepest desire, your deepest fear. Um, there is, for example, what's similar about us, like
Mm.
appreciation exercise, what we are afraid to face in life, and like always synchronicity kind of bring people together. Like even if we have a big group, then when they divide it, they kind of like get attracted to similar
Yeah.
kind of like vibrations. So it's like
Yeah.
really magical how like the universe works.
Yeah.
And some of us some of us even are not aware of our deepest desire, but when we have this reflection from it for it from outside, we are more in touch with it. So people
Mm-hmm.
come to tears, and you know, like you created the deepest connection when you are in this vulnerability. And when people like just do this exercises together, they cry, they laugh, like everything's so authentic, and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of create a deep level of connection between them.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do, or what changes a lot in people is this sensation of being really seen and
Hmm.
safe, no matter what we express. And it isn't always easy, right? Because sometimes something a person says or does or whatever might also cause us to feel, uneasy or uncomfortable
Yeah,
or whatever. But
yeah.
that makes such a big difference, because I feel like still sometimes in some encounters that I have, it's like, can I say this specific thing or not? Am I safe to express this? Am
Hmm.
I not safe to express this? And when you are in that space where you know you're being shown that you're safe, that just changes everything.
Yeah.
So invite us a little bit into your life now and what you are looking at creating in the future.
Yeah, so just before the corona started, we were supposed to do our second sacred circle retreat, which is also a great opportunity for healing, where we use the completion process and other method to heal emotional wound and also bring connection in the same time um, to the group. And
Mm.
it's a empowering experience for people where they can learn how to like hold space for each other.
Mm.
Unfortunately, this didn't happen because of the lockdown, and we're still uncertain if we're gonna do it in September or next year.
Mm.
We're still working online, like as you know, doing facilitating and holding space for people to heal and to connect to their self and to manifest their dreams, and like
Mhm.
also helping them in relationship uh, with my partner, and also like of course doing parts work and completion process session with people who need it.
Yeah.
But in the external, like as a bigger plan, we're planning to like create a big community in a place where we can have like more freedom and be self-sufficient with our food, with our energy resources, with our water. So we are dreaming, or not dreaming, we are actually putting it in practice to
Mhm.
like start building a community in Ecuador. So that will be like our project for the
So
coming years,
exciting.
and be part of bigger community there. So we imagine it to be as a, like a self-empowerment and connection hub for people who want to travel and experience the shamanic culture there. We might have like retreats. We will have retreats and gatherings, and kind of like bring people together to live in harmony with nature, to grow their own food. And that's like our biggest goal right now. And we will be still coming to Europe to do like those events for people who can travel that far,
Mhm.
and do also online workshops. Like we currently do 2 or 3 online workshops where we with Mia, we channel
Mhm.
people's resistance. She's like
Mhm.
also amazing channel, and I help holding safe space for the group.
Mhm.
So that's what we're doing now, and it feels like we are moving forward to reach more people and to help integrating and help like bring in more harmony and integration to the world.
That is so beautiful. I'm so grateful to speak to you. I feel like I am hearing so many questions from people who might be watching this interview later, but I think there's already so much information. I definitely was like close to tears about 3 times during this interview. So
But
thank you so much for sharing this,
yeah,
for sharing
it
these
was pleasure for
insights.
me to be in your series and your show.
Guys, if you want to get in touch with Ram, I will put all the information in the in the description below, my information as well.
Mhm.
And if any questions came up during this interview, we're super happy to answer them. Or
Mhm.
if you want a follow-up or whatever, just let us know. Ram, do
Yeah.
you have some last
Mhm.
final words, something that just comes to you now that you want to share?
I feel like if I would say like something to people who are listening, connect to your intuition.
Mm,
That's the key.
yeah.